Hello everyone, and welcome back to Aethelburg, our European series here in Cities Skylines 2. Today we're tackling the downtown waterfront, stretching all the way from the Diamond Coast to Queen's Landing. We'll redo the old port, add some nice promenades, and introduce the most controversial building in the city to date. As always, if you're enjoying the series, please consider liking the video so others can find it. And a bit of housekeeping, if you're watching this before February 20th, 2026, we're having a castle building competition over on Discord. Build a castle or fortress in Cities Skylines 2, submit your save to PDX mods before the deadline, then I'll do an overview video, and we can all then vote on the best one. More details in the link in the description, but with all that out of the way, let's begin. Alright, let's begin with a little bit of planning on this overhead shot of the bay right now, and my goal today is to fill in everything from the original water tower here, going all the way through the coastline down to Queen's Landing. And this is a lot of space to fill, so I took a bunch of inspiration from a few different people. So before we begin, I want to give a shout out to Teddy Radko, Victimism, Charles Simon, Julia the Explorer, The Saucy Man, The Spice Master, Heriel, Pie, Jellybeans, Bolton Hagen, Max Verstappen, Deutscher Stat Planner, and Trimidor. All of them were very helpful and shared pictures and diagrams on what to do here, so very much appreciated, really helped out with the brainstorming process. But we're going to begin on the left with the old port. This is all industrial right now, and it was supposed to be modeled after, early industrial age London, where they had factories and smokestacks along the water here without much care to pollution, but we are way beyond that age now, so I think it is time we gentrify this up. So we're going to build a marina here with the help of a few new mods. We'll get a breakwater and an actual lighthouse on that breakwater, and because this is waterfront property right across from the main station here, I figured this would be pretty desirable land, hence the gentrification. We'll get some mixed-use urban promenades and some commercial signature buildings like some bars. I don't want to get rid of all those factories though, and I figured historically, as this land value rose, these factories were probably pushed to the other side of the canal. So on that piece of land, we're going to get some more industrial vibes, a little grittier, and then a ferry terminal for both our ferry going through the canal to Queen's Landing and maybe one or two new outside connections. But I don't want to make this all pretty and sunshine and rainbows. I feel like this should keep the industrial vibe we got going currently in the old port. By our main plaza along the top though, people have been asking for a promenade, so that's what we're going to do here. We'll get some more low density commercial buildings along the waterfront here, but making sure we have enough room for a bike path, a beachfront path, and then I will keep this beach around. However, I don't imagine this would be a nice sunny warm Mediterranean beach. We've been saying that Aethelburg is the capital of a fictional country called Northland, which is kind of in northern Europe, so I don't imagine this would be the most pleasant water to swim in, but we will keep the beach around just to give people the option. Beyond the promenade though is probably when I'll lose subscribers, because we are going to build a big, beautiful hotel and casino, and I kind of want people to hate this development. It's going to be tacky, it's going to be out there, and I'm taking inspiration from the W Barcelona Hotel, which really sticks out along the coastline here, and I want something like that, something that everyone in Aethelburg can rally against and do absolutely nothing about. And last, along this part of the coastline, which is rockier and hillier, let's get some waterfront residential. And I don't mean single-family housing variety, more medium residential. And this is somewhat inspired by the Amalfi Coast, so we'll get maybe 1 or 2 layers of terraced housing. And by terraces, I mean steps, not the UK row house style. Alright, that is the general idea, so let's dive into our first segment, which is renovating Old Port and building out this marina. The layout of which is inspired by a suggestion from Teddy Radko, who is of course one of the map makers of the St. Angelo map, alongside Poplar Ponderosa. And Teddy's been putting out really good interchanges on PDX mods for those who are interested. But the idea here is we're going to surround our marina with 2 breakwaters. One coming from this corner here out into the bay around there, and that will protect boats from ferry traffic here and give us some land for a nice customs house, which is something a few people have suggested, gives the area a bit of history, and we can say it's like a museum now. But then we'll have another bigger breakwater coming out from the water tower here going into the middle of the bay, and that will of course protect the marina from the open seas out there. But then we'll cap it off with an actual lighthouse this time. And then in between Old Boatman's Road and this row of shops here, we're just going to demolish everything and redo that road network. So let's begin with a bit of bulldozing. I left High Street around just as a third way into the neighborhood to alleviate traffic in these two intersections. But you can see this white squiggly line, that is sea level. And that's telling me that our quay wall is probably a bit too low and would be prone to flooding. So I'm gonna use Move It, hit M, select all these nodes here, including High Street. And let's raise this up just a smidge. Yeah, I think that should be okay. And then we can raise these buildings up too. And then I'll grab my level terrain tool and make sure the old port is fairly level. And while I have this tool up, if this is your first marina, what I like to do is bring out the land to where I know I'm going to build some roads and some piers and some breakwaters, just because that's a lot easier to build upon than open water. So for this first one, let's bring this out from the corner there. And we're going to go out to maybe around there before turning in. And let's get rid of that sandy beach, which was apparently for the entire coastline. Whoops. All right, but yeah, let's get rid of the quay walls next. And for this first one, I'm going to use a wide pavement path, and this is under pathways. This one right here. Unfortunately, these don't connect to roads all that well. Ideally, I want this flush with that wall, but you can see it's going to do something weird like that. So to get around this, what I'm going to do is plop down this net lane and line it up first. I think that's fairly lined up, but then I'm going to use Move It to drag this node underneath the road here. And it's already underneath the pavement, so that works out beautifully. And that's looking aligned pretty well. So let's continue this out. Seems big enough. And then I mentioned I want an old customs office around here. I figured, you know, since this is the original port, it makes sense to have the original customs office here. And this is like the center of it all. So we can plop it down in this triangle here. I'm going to grab level terrain tool again. Let's create a new pad of land. And this will need a road for utilities. So I'm going to grab an alleyway this time. You can see this is going to make a weird connection there as well. So let's go up to about there. And then again, with the Move It trick, I'm just going to drag this node underneath. Just like that. Last step is to turn all these back into quay walls. Sometimes with breakwaters, you will see, you know, a bunch of rocks and dirt, kind of like what we have over in the Aethelburg Port Authority. This one right here, if my screen doesn't blind me. But yeah, you can see it's got some terrain underneath. And it's a little more roughhouse. Oh, it's got a lighthouse. In fact, the bigger breakwater will probably look just like this. But I'm going to attach some piers and boats and docks to this particular one, so we will keep it as a full concrete block like that. And that I can live with, the fence there kind of overlapping a bit. But yeah, that's looking good. So let's get our road on this side of the marina next. I'm gonna go back to our level terrain tool. We'll grab this elevation and just bring this down to our water tower. And this particular road is a quay wall. Yeah, this medium quay with two-way road. So let's grab maybe this node here and come all the way down to our water tower. And I think that should be enough on both sides to have piers coming out here and not overlapping in the middle. Let's quickly do this section of the marina next, and this will flow into our breakwater that's going to come out into the bay, but I'm not going to do the entire thing yet because I'm not sure how much space I want for the opening. So for now, let's just extend our road from that connection there. We'll get the same road type, and this is 130 degrees right there, so let's mirror that. Nice, and then we can turn these back into quay walls and level all the land inside the marina. So from this view, I see two things. One, I gotta clean up that connection there. But two, I think we should bring this pier out farther so we have more room inside the marina. So let's extend the land out a bit more. And then with move it, I'm going to grab these nodes here and just drag this out. And then I'll make that segment the same length as this one right here, or roughly. And then we'll elongate this one as well. And I think those are different angles, but that's okay. Yeah, that gives us more space to work with. Let's clean up this thing now. Much cleaner. Now for the piers, there are two things I have in mind. Along the main road here, we're going to get a series of these, wrong button again, these narrow wooden leisure piers. Coming off at a 90 from the quay wall. Something like that, and we can end with a nice T section. And then I'm going to park some boats in parallel and use a new mod by Mayor Won't called Floating Docks, and they're under residential props. These ones right here, I was looking at pictures of marinas and I see these pylons, or these, what are they called? Just piles, separating boats so they bump into these instead of each other. So we can get a few boats going down the length of these piers, separate them with the piles. But over here along the wall, I'm looking at a Google Earth representation of the Marina Zeus or Zeus in Greece. And I just see all these billionaire yachts kind of parked along the wall here. And I want to do something like that with these other props. So we'll get some walkways coming down from the wall itself. Clearly not at the bottom of the ocean there. Eighth time's a charm. And then we'll get those floating docks like this. And you can see there are some holes on the side. That's where we can kind of stick down these pylons to hold them in place. I mean, something like that, sweet. And then I'm going to go to find it and just search for yacht. And we have two. This one is from Bridges and Ports. You can tell from that icon. And from what I'm seeing on Google Earth, I see a bunch of boats kind of parked like this. So we can stack them down the length. But this one, this is a mega yacht from ItsCon, another modder. And they also introduced a mod called Boating Package, which has a bunch more boats, a bunch more assets that we can do throughout the entire marina to get some asset variety. But we'll do a bunch of these in parallel. I think we have sailboats too. A little smaller than I wanted. I think there's a big one from, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. This is where all the billionaires go. Love it. All right, so we'll get a series of these in parallel, build out our pier network, and then fill them all in. Yes, some of these piers are a little close together. I feel like that's a tight squeeze, but I mean, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this is one of my better marinas, just looking at Google Earth, and I'm not a boat guy, so I probably missed something obvious. I think we will fence this in for security, but on the whole, yeah, I'm happy with how this turned out. One thing though, if you're building a marina with these wooden piers, I realize they don't want to go below a fixed height, so if you want to get these closer to water level, you do have to use Move It to just shift them down. But everything else is, yeah, looking good. So again, thanks to Mayor Won't and ItsCon for all these new mods here. But now we can start filling in Old Port, and I think we should rezone Diamond Coast as well. You can see that the hill kind of shoots up out of the water, which is pretty much what we have over by Queen's Landing. So I think when we do some terraced housing, let's do a similar treatment over here. So I'm gonna get rid of this road, and then all these waterfront houses. And then around our water tower, we can like turn this into a nice Parker Plaza, but gotta make sure that this is actually attached to our road. And is that the only sewage we have for the entire city? Wow, that thing's a trooper. All right, yeah, we'll get some shops along, not Pinehurst, but Old Boatman's. And since this is a redevelopment site, I think we can get away with some modern assets. So like urban promenades and some commercial signature bars along Old Boatman's here. I think first, let's split up this block with a pedestrian road. Nice. And the first asset I want to get is the Sunset Brewery, which is a commercial signature building. Obviously sunset kind of fits the vibe. And did I leave myself enough room? I did with Anarchy. Let's get it in this corner here. And I think that's okay. On the opposite side, there's a new custom asset by someone named Valex called the Renaissance Hotel, which I feel like would be a good place or a good asset to place right in front of our nice marina here in case, you know, someone's coming off from a long fishing trip or whatever and they need a quick place to stay. So this is a residential, is it? No, it's commercial. This one right here. And this is just a really nice looking asset. And we have a couple others from this modder that I'll probably plop down along the eventual promenade over by downtown. All right, so we got that all settled along High Street. I think we also need a school for this new development site. I have not been keeping up with elementary capacity. We are fully in the red. So let's get an urban elementary school, which has capacity for 1,200. It's actually nowhere near what we need, but let's get it in this corner facing N1. Wait, is that supposed to be N1? Okay, we'll think about that. But let's immediately upgrade this and get this nice whimsical looking playground on the top. All right, next there are some US Southwest assets I want along Old Boatman's. The first is called the Westwood Center, which is like a shopping center. Plop that down there, and I feel like that kind of matches the aesthetic of the Renaissance Hotel, so that works out. And then a couple more. Let's get this Apotheke. I don't know, but good vibes and cocktails, that sounds like a millennial's heaven to me. Let's plop this down like that. Excellent, and for the rest, let's get some of that urban promenade content. And you know, I definitely don't want to hide the artwork on the back of the Westwood Center right here. So I'm going to plop down a nice dog park in there instead, which should be just the perfect fit. Yeah. I'm not sure how the guests at the Renaissance Hotel will feel about the dogs barking, but that is the price they pay. All right, let's continue with the urban promenades in this block, and then we'll get some more signature buildings down by the water tower. You know, if we're gonna do terraced housing along the Diamond Coast, I feel like that would be an older aesthetic than what we have going on in Old Port right here with the redevelopment. And since that's inspired by the Amalfi Coast, let's stick with our Mediterranean heritage, which we have along the rest of the waterfront there. So this should be pretty simple because luckily all the zoning tiles are intact, which never happens. But let's go 3 deep. And I'm going to bring it out to, let's say, around here. And in between the buildings and the water tower, I think we need more elementary capacity. So let's get a Mediterranean one. And I kind of want this to be a corner building, so I'm going to grab an alleyway and plop that in between these assets here. If I delete that, not just the surface. There you go, now it's a corner building, and not sure what's happened right here. Classic solution, just hide it. All right, on this side of the water tower, I feel like every marina or yacht club I've ever seen has a tennis court. And in fact, the one I showed you on Google Earth, the Marina Zaius in Greece, it's got tennis courts on the water, which is pretty cool, and I feel like that's a missed opportunity. So let's make up for it by getting a tennis court around here. And there's a new park from the Bridges and Ports DLC called the Parkside Cafe that I want to plop down here too. We're going to need more land though, so I'm going to grab that elevation and bring this out a bit farther. And we'll start with the Parkside Cafe, which is a large park. I'm going to have it facing to the left there. We'll get a road in between, and on the other side is where the tennis courts will be. But you can see that this has some built-in paths that we can extend around the water tower here. You know, sometimes this is helpful that the surface auto expands, and sometimes it is a giant pain. All right, for this, I'm gonna get a 2-lane road with parallel parking just to help out with our atrocious parking situation. Let's come off on the back here, and then this can snake up the coast to eventually meet with N1 over there. Definitely following the contour lines there. All right, tennis court on this side now. And last step, bring the road around. And this does not look as good as I hoped it would be. I mean, the gaps, obviously. For this, we can just shift this building over, and that should open up room for a 2-unit. Yeah, like that. But I think I want a bit more asset variety here. So let's get rid of, I'm going to pause it. Let's get rid of these 2 buildings. And I'm going to D-zone that right there. I guess this is the same building that's going to come in. Good, we do have a 3x2. Let's do a 3x2 over here as well. And of course, we still have a gap here, but we can fix that with a nice pocket park, I believe. Yeah, just like that. We'll come back for the terraced housing and the rest of the breakwater later, but for now, let's complete these final 2 blocks. For this one right here, I want to get a decal by Rizara, who has a few marine-themed ones. If you go to your decals tool, it's all these right here, and they have some really good ones. I think I want the anchor, though. This one's too big. Let's get the small one. I'll plop it right in the center. And they also have marine-themed surfaces. So I'm going to get, let's try this one here. And I do have the area bucket tool now, so hopefully, or almost, we can fill in the gaps manually. All right, very cool. There are also some modern sculptures, again from Rizara, and I believe, I'm just going to use Find It for this. We have a few here, and I'm thinking... City. Is this in Mexico City? I feel like that's where this is from. But if you're coming off the ferry for the first time, I feel like this would be a cool tourist attraction. So let's get this right on top of the anchor. A good selfie moment. Okay, pretty cool. And now let's get some planter props and some benches around this. I'm sure the restaurant owners love having that tourist trap right next to them. For the customs office, though, there is an asset by Coma CS2 called the former Osaka Merchant Ship Moji Branch. And yes, it's the wrong continent, but it is a merchant ship building, and it looks really good. So I'm gonna go to find it, and let's look this up. I mean, this looks like it could be an old customs office. It's got, you know, early 1900s vibe or late 1800s, nice stonework, and I think this is a good size too. So let's plop it down along cold water. And I believe, yeah, we're gonna need an alleyway on this side too for road access. Pretty cool. Okay, I'm gonna call this the Old Customs House Museum. Then we get some trees and some plazas all around it. And I'm a little afraid I'm gonna mess up the node here, but if I continue this alleyway down into the road itself, let's see what happens. And it is not the end of the world. That is perfect. Okay, that's looking pretty good, I think, despite that ferry running into the wall there. But I got these wet puddle decals all along the inside. Figured since this is a marina, they would be tracking water pretty much everywhere. And like I said, we're going to do that breakwater in a bit. But for now, let's hop to the other side of the canal. What I want to do is bring a road down this way parallel to this one to the same distance. And then we'll go off at a 135-degree angle to the left this time, so it's nice and mirrored. And on that breakwater, or pier, or reclaimed land, whatever you want to call it, I want to get a couple of things. One, I want to get a ferry stop for this ferry line going into the city and out to Queen's Landing. And then I want to get an international ferry route as well. Unfortunately, we can't do outside connections with this type of ferry, and I think that makes sense. Those boats are pretty small. And then we have the harbor option, but this thing is way too big, I think, for the bay. Like, the net lane takes up pretty much half the width already, so this is just way too big. So what we're going to do is instead get a small port, which has a passenger ship terminal that is much smaller, and I think we can make that fit. And then it will have its own security loop, so it'll get off the boat, go through security, and then we're going to place the replacement for our customs building here, a newer version, on that breakwater. Inside the harbor, as I mentioned, I want this to be more industrial though, a bit more gritty, so we'll get some fishing industry, some warehouses, some factories, before looping to the right. And the layout for this, I'm kind of inspired by the Port of Valencia, which kind of funnels traffic into this enclosure. I think it looks pretty cool, and their customs office is actually in the center of it, but I want to make sure that we have a more logical flow of passengers from outside into the customs office, and it would be kind of weird if they had to pass all of our businesses along the breakwater. So I'm going to begin by disabling our ferry route, because I want to make sure we have some land going out to the water here. So we'll grab our level terrain tool, grab this elevation here, and we'll bring this out to start, out to around that point, and then we'll veer off to the left. And let's grab our handy dandy key road here, coming off from this intersection. And I feel like that's not perfectly parallel, so I'm going to turn off this option and just eyeball it. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, from here things get a little tricky because I gotta plop down the port gate, and that has two one-way roads. So what I'm gonna do is get a pedestrian street to start, and we'll come off at our 135-degree angle this way. And then inside this corner is where I'm gonna plop down the gate. So this is under water, and it's the small port gate. Gotta make sure the arrow is pointing to the right. Let's get this flush against the pedestrian walkway. And my thought process here is I want the regular ferry traffic to be able to access this and just go out to the pier and get some nice views. So we'll have a security fence to enclose the international route over here. And that's looking a little off. There we go. All right, I'm gonna grab a one-way alley and connect this up. And this section right here, I'm going to convert back into a pedestrian road, just so cars know that they are meant to go that way. And I feel like we probably should have a turnaround point. I wonder if I can squeeze one in between those roads. Just barely. Perfect. From here, let's bring out another road from Bramblewood. I guess these street names don't really make much sense now. But we'll come off at a 90, going all the way down here. And let's connect up our exit lane, and then we can turn this into a regular road. And definitely clean this up. And again, we'll get a security fence in between those, maybe some landscaping, but this is the side I want to attach the passenger ferry terminal to. So let's get rid of the existing ferry lane, which will instead come on this side. But I'm not sure why I have this unlocked already. I feel like I don't have a mod that unlocks this. I guess I've never placed the small port, so maybe all of this is available up front, but we're gonna get this one right here. And you can see that that's like a third of the size of the harbor that we were looking at before. Let's attach it to our road right around here. I'm gonna give it some space so it's not too close to the eventual fishing industry out there. And for whatever reason, it chose to be like a couple meters below the road. That's weird. I don't know if I can use move it on subcomponents like this. I cannot. So I wonder if I select this and just Control H it to the road, will that pop that up? It will. Perfect. All right, so good to know if you're having the same issue. From here, let's do a little bit of terrain work. And now we can create this international route coming from here, and we'll just cut through out to our, oh, there's the line. It's a far away. And this is, of course, going to Dewey Del Mar. And you know what? I'm a complete dummy. I didn't realize that this is supposed to be attached to a port key or a port road, and that explains why this terrain looks so weird. And then two, I feel like it should be pointing that way, so the passenger ship isn't doing a loop in these tight quarters here. So instead, let's upgrade Brook Street to be a port key road, and I'm just gonna delete this for now. We got plenty of money, so I'm not worried about cost. But we'll just replace this one, and that has the added benefit of making it so we don't need a crazy angle for Park Lane. And let's use the same type of road that we got inside the port here, which is a one-way. Okay, from here, let's extend the land out a little bit, and this will also just make it easy to get some infrastructure inside this breakwater. Sorry, ship. 1 second. Let's grab the same road type and come off at a 90. I believe we need 6 units for this asset, so we need one more. Turn these sides into quay walls. And we'll do the same for Bayview Street when we do the regular ferry. And now we should be able to plop this down over top the road there. Yeah, look how it's snapping there. All right, that's what I always wanted to do. That looks so much better. All right, let's clean up some of these edges. Okay, I got a road going back to the main gate now, and I truncated the width of this block so it didn't poke out too far into the bay here, and that'll make it easier to cover with our eventual breakwater over there. But for the rest of this space, let's get a plaza out in front, the first thing that people stepping off the terminal will see. So I'm gonna use a Rizrod decal, one of the marine themed ones. And I haven't used number 6 yet, so let's plop this down right in the center. And then I'll extend this existing concrete surface from the terminal. We can get some like planter props and some benches on the side there, but across the street, this is where I want to plop down the new customs office. And thinking about the timeline for its construction, We said the original one was like late 1800s, and if that was in service for about a century, this one was probably built in the 70s or the 80s, which means I don't want it to look very good. I want it to be kind of ugly and very brutalist, you know, whatever the people in the 70s thought was cool and totally isn't now. So for that, I'm going to use the city police station, which is an ugly brown, ugly brick and concrete, and it's perfect. And what's cool is this has a helicopter upgrade, so it's like Coast Guard too. But this is our new customs office, and I'm sure in like an episode or two, the city will take a vote and want to renovate it. So very quickly, let's finish out this side of the canal, reestablish our ferry line, and finally do this breakwater, since I know how much space I'm dealing with in here now. The plan is, I'm going to extend a road from Garland back into Bayview, and that's going to have to go through an auxiliary gate. Otherwise, this will complain about bypassed access, but we can say that this is the employee entrance. And then in this plot of land, I'm going to plop down a bus station, which will act as a shuttle service for passengers disembarking from the terminal there to Trinity Station and back. Along this strip of land, I'm going to get some fishing industry, some warehouses and factories, and even a tram depot, because later I'm going to create a new tram line going all the way down the coast, and I think we're going to need more cars. But we'll extend the roadway to the right to eventually make its way by the plaza. And for the ferry line, I could have stops on either side of the canal, but I feel like unless you lived here, that would be a nightmare to figure out, to know which side of the canal you got to be on. So instead, let's have both stops on Bayview Street. We can have two separate ones. And to ease access between this side of the canal and that one, I will add a pedestrian bridge so people don't have to walk all the way down to there. And then finally for this breakwater, we'll come off to the left with an alleyway, surrounded by riprap on either side and capped off with a lighthouse, but that should protect the entrance to the marina and the canal there. But yeah, that is the plan. So with that, let's build this out. Okay, definitely a more complete looking marina now with a slightly more industrial side and the final breakwater protecting the entrance to the canal and the marina. This is a simple alleyway coming off of old boatmen's with riprap on either side and the large lighthouse from the Bridges and Ports DLC. And as you can see over here, I reestablished the ferry line with some shoreline stops spliced into Bayview Street. The key stop wanted to attach to the center of the road, and that meant these boats were basically colliding inside the road, and it looked a little weird. So I went for these types of stops, and I kept the fences around. To me, they kind of look like security fences for lines going on and off the boat. So I thought that was a nice touch. Behind the customs house, got a few more landscaping details, some surface work, extra parking lot by the bus station, and some Coast Guard ships for search and rescue missions, plus a few other boats here just to liven up the area. And then we have this fishing industry along Hickory Lane with all these warehouses. And I added some graffiti decals to kind of, I don't know, not dirty up the area, but I definitely want this to feel a little grittier than the very bougie, very residential area of Old Port. And you can see we have two tiers here with the fishing industry on the bottom and some more utilities and general factories on the top, separated by a walkway. And this is the small tram depot from Tygon's Tram Pack. It only has 2 cars, but I think that should be enough for the final route I want to get along N2. And then the large bike hall, an extra fire station because our coverage out here was very lacking. Some Eastern European businesses along N2 to match the vibe we got going by Trinity, and a couple more factories. But I want to extend this walkway as a bike route, I think, all the way to the plaza. And that will also separate 2 tiers with a kind of beachy or rocky area on the bottom, and then some waterfront businesses and a nice pedestrian street on the top. This pedestrian bridge was actually a huge pain because I couldn't get the staircases to connect to the quay wall without making some weird columns. So what I did was actually brought the staircase down on the side of the quay walls, and then with the replace tool, just shimmied them over until they were in line. And somehow that worked out. You can see there's a little bit of wonkiness beneath it, but I mean, you can barely tell. So I'm okay with that. And I couldn't replace it with something a little grander looking. So if we go to our Pathways tab, and for example, try to replace it with the arch bridge, in that case, you can see it'll add columns in the bottom there, and definitely don't want that. So this, I think, is good enough. Now, before we move on, I got a really fun lore suggestion from someone named Tread von Torpatz on the Discord, who has this incredibly detailed write-up of a fictional cruise line called the Ethel American Line. It was founded in the early 1900s, and it transported people from New York to Aethelburg. But then during the war, the government commissioned one of their boats, the SS Ethofled, as a way to transport troops from America to Europe. And they said we should have a memorial, and I totally agree. And I think the Old Port is the perfect place for that, since this is where I imagine the troops were dropped off. So what I want to do is move this marina decal over to this plaza instead. It's right next to the customs office, so I feel like that's still a good place for it. And then let's build a memorial on this plot of land. And I'm going to get rid of this very touristy city statue. We can move it to the eventual beach plaza over there. But for now, I think I want this to be a little more solemn. So I'm going to begin by getting rid of these middle trees here. And let's get rid of both these surfaces. I'm going to get a marina one instead. And the fountain. Let's go for, we have this one on that plaza. So let's go for this one now. All right, cool. I'm gonna control R this decal into the middle of here. And it fits pretty well. Excellent. Okay, now for this memorial, let's get rid of our statue. And I'm gonna use a few props. The first is the large columbarium from the Netherlands Cemetery Pack. And this definitely looks like some kind of war memorial where maybe the crew of the SS Ethofled each has a plaque on the wall inside here. So let's plop this down right in the center and line that up with Move It. Now inside, 2 more. Another prop from the Netherlands Cemetery Pack. This one right here, the crematorium. However, I'm gonna use this as a pedestal for a boat prop. That's gonna symbolize the SS Ethofled. So let's center this up, and then I'm gonna lower it into the ground. And we don't have many boat props to choose from, but I think the most appropriate is probably some kind of sailboat like this one. Okay, I mean, sure, let's line up a little better. And this could definitely use some kind of informational plaque, and for that, let's just get a park sign. Okay, very cool. And finally, let's name this the SS Ethofled Memorial. Alright, very cool, and thanks again to Tred von Torpatz. We are just about ready to move on to the beach promenade, but before I forget, I gotta include these new buildings in a district. So I'm gonna include, yeah, there we go, it's already complaining. Let's include this athletic facility as part of the Diamond Coast, and the Customs House definitely needs to be part of Old Port. Now for this side of the harbor, I'm thinking the obvious and very boring answer would be Newport, but let's go Dutch and call this Oosthaven, which is East Harbor, since this is on the east side of the canal here. And I'm determining that because the cathedral is pointing westward that way. And then we can assign city services. Speaking of utilities, full disclosure, I was having issues with garbage trucks and hearses not finding a valid pathway to a bunch of important buildings in the city here. And after spending hours shifting them around and replopping them, I just kind of gave up and downloaded the Magic Hearse and Magic Garbage mods by River Mochi, which yes is totally cheating, but honestly the alternative was even more frustrating. So if you're wondering how I'm managing death care and garbage so well, the answer is I'm not. So now, finally, let's move on to the promenade. And I know I've said that 3 times already, but for real this time. What I want to do is upgrade this to have a bike path before bringing it down to the right to meet up with this section of the plaza here, and then making its way even farther down the coast. But I want there to be a wider kind of pedestrian promenade, so what I'm going to do is split off the walking section from the bike section, and then fill it in with a nice surface before merging it back into this connection here. We're gonna have to redo these roads because they're one way, but we'll see how it works. So let's go back over here and first upgrade this, or rather replace it. And I did a big coastal bike route on the last episode of Dewey Del Mar, and what I said there is I want the bikes to be on the right and pedestrians on the left so they have the better view of the water here. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll come off very briefly as a combined path. And then from here, let's get a wide pavement path, and that will merge into that node there. Actually, on second thought, let's just redo this entire stretch, make this easier to work with. Here is where we can split off the bike section. So let's get a dedicated bike lane, 2-way, and we can use maybe this part of the grid as a guide for how far we want to be. Let's, yeah, go that far away. And of course the grid is broken over here, so that's of no use to us. We'll eyeball it. Okay, I think that worked out pretty well. For these roads, I'm going to replace them with a road builder variety that has 2 directions, but it's still pretty narrow. Just like that, and then I'm going to use Move It to drag this underneath the walking path, so there's not a weird connection there. All right, let's do the same thing on this side. Okay, that's looking fine, but I just had a thought. You can see with the contour lines we have a few meters of separation between the upper and lower level, and I'm wondering if we have room to do 3 levels. Plaza, pathway, and then the beach below that. And that'll give us some separation between the bike lane and the plaza here. That just seems a little dangerous. So what I'm going to do is let's get this type of pedestrian road going on this side. Then we'll turn that into a quay wall, lower this section a bit, and then have a quay wall on this side before getting into the beach area. And that'll help with the centering issues of this decal. You can see there's more space on this side than that one. And obviously I could just shift that over, but figured let's try to make some lemonade out of some lemons. So let's grab this road here. And then we can square this up. Bring back the surface. And with the replace tool, get it a little bit closer. And of course, got to redo the surfaces again, crap. Okay, next step, let's turn this side into a quay wall and have to shift those benches back. All right, and then with move it, let's lower the bike path a smidge. Okay, I think that makes a bit more sense. We can shift this over. Let me fix these benches really quickly. And then the surface I have in mind for the walkway and the entire promenade is actually a Japanese-inspired one. If I go to tile surfaces, it's number 8, which is a lot brighter, a little less dour than that one over there. But I feel like this is a pattern. Oh yeah, I think that looks great. That's a pattern we can repeat for a large stretch of land, as opposed to this one, which gets a little tired on the eyes, I feel like, with all the repeating patterns there. Okay, I think this is a good start. We will see what it looks like with everything else filled in. But very quickly, let's get some staircases to connect this path to the one below it now. And Harbor Master J has a few staircase assets, and I'm going to try out this kind of shorter 1 meter one since it's not too much of a height difference. And I think I like this color better. Alright, obviously we'll decorate it more later, make it seem a little more seamless, but with that, let's move on. I think let's do the beach tier next, because this should be pretty straightforward. I think we'll have shops on this road, and then do some sort of mini breakwater that'll separate the development from the more recreational area. And then I'll extend a pier out. Remember, we had one before, but I deleted it to help with those connections. And I think I'm going to get a fun little Ferris wheel on the very end here. And this is going to be a touristy pier somewhat inspired by Scheveningen in the Netherlands. Hopefully I said that right. But basically a super long pier with some tourist attractions on the end going straight out into the water. So let's do a little bit of terraforming first. I want to make sure we have a flat pad of land beneath the walkway first. And you can see that the surface is kind of covering the wall there, but that's okay. That's where I'm going to get some brick walls to make it feel a little older. And I'm going to use Fragonaut's Medieval Asset Pack. I'm going to look for a big wall. Yeah, this one right here. Let's get a row of these to cover the front of that. And again, just make it seem like this was built, I don't know, 100 years ago? And you know, it's not a huge change, but I feel like that's just a nice touch for people at ground level. And we'll definitely get some staircases going down onto the beach area after making some connections. But let's get some waterfront businesses here, do the breakwater, and then with the sand surface and some decals, create the beach area. And whoops, I forgot to delete our little kiosk there. That will remain in the air until we get the pier back. So this is actually a zoning category from the Bridges and Ports DLC, and it's the EU Low Density Waterfront Business. So let's get some there. Let those zone in auto-magically. And then I'm going to do a smaller breakwater on this side. In fact, we can even use one of the new piers. Let's try this narrow, solid concrete leisure pier. And again, it would be nice if it didn't create such weird connections there, but I'm going to hide that with some riprap, I think. And that just acts as some kind of separation between people on the beach and kind of the industrial vibes over here. I wonder if I should... Yeah, let's extend this wooden pier out, and that'll actually give us some more room for some ships just to fill this area out. The beach area itself, we will of course use Sully's sand pack here. So I'm going to start with golden sand base, and this is going to cover up most of the area, but then we'll taper off in density as we go up the shore. And that, I think, is looking beachy enough, though sometimes I wish the game did this automatically instead of us having to layer surfaces and decals like that. But I will put that on the wish list for 2026. All right, 2 more special builds I want to do along this section of the waterfront. The first is getting our leisure pier back, and for that, I'm going to use a concrete one, just so it looks a little more official and permanent than a wooden one we got going over in the marinas. So let's get this right down the center. And I can tell that's centered because it's right underneath our gazebo. I'm going to bring it out a smidge farther. Lower this back down to pier level. Right on top of that bench. And then on the very end, I'm going to get a static ploppable of a Ferris wheel. Not this one, it's a little too big. That's the same one. Let's do the old Ferris wheel. Yeah, this is a better size, and it's very colorful. Plop it on the end there, raise this up. Oh, it spins! I did not expect that for a static ploppable, that's cool. Let's get some concrete pillars under here, though. And I would totally buy a ticket to that. All right, that was the first thing. The second thing is I want an old Maritime museum for this block right here. Now, we have a real Maritime museum from the Bridges and Ports DLC, and it is admittedly cool looking, but I think it doesn't really fit the area. It's too modern looking, too touristy, especially against our industry here and the Mediterranean heritage. So instead, I'm going to use the Inconfidencia Museum from Debrum. And this is a tourist attraction under our Parks tab. This, I think, fits the vibe very well. And again, same kind of Mediterranean architecture we got over here. This is actually the building I wanted to get on top of the train tracks. But since it's a normal asset, it brings up the terrain and kind of ruins the tunnel over there. So instead, let's pop it down right here. And this is, of course, to honor Aethelburg's original maritime industry. I'm going to have it facing the roundabout at a funky angle. Very cool. All right, obviously we'll decorate the surface there. Last thing, I want to get a small cafe in this plot of land that is the museum cafe, and just a spot for bikers to get a drink before they go on the long bike ride. For that, I'm going to use the Fleur de Thé, which I have used, I think, twice in this city already, but honestly, it's the smallest cafe we have, and I think it fits well in this spot right here, even if it is across the street from a noisy tram depot. We'll call this Museum Cafe. Excellent. Okay, with that, let's go on a quick time lapse of zoning along N2, getting some landscaping in between the businesses and the walkway, and of course getting some staircases leading down to the beach area. Okay, welcome back everyone. That was a lot, so let's do a recap. Starting over in Oosthaven, where I completely forgot to get a boat ramp, so I added one here where there used to be a pier, and then add this small storage facility on top with a couple of decals. And this is making me realize I completely forgot to get one over in our marina as well. So I think after this episode, as a follow-up, I will add one to that breakwater. And then really flushed out our old Maritime Museum complex here with the sunken terrace park and a couple of pocket parks on the edges by the Fleur d'été, which is our museum cafe. A lot of landscaping and surface work to fill in the cracks. And then more commercial signature buildings, the Mermaid's Tea Lounge, which was the vibe I was going for. And then some EU low-density business waterfront variety, again from Bridges and Ports DLC. Behind which I went back and forth 3 times on the plants here. I had these, then I had tall oaks, but then I realized that's blocking the views of the people on top. So went back down to the, what is this, the evergreen pear tree. Not much changed with Aethelburg Square itself, but as you can see, I got the tram loop station on the side here because I had a bus stop here, or I have a bus stop there, and I had a tram stop on that side, but I figured it would be nice to have a transfer point here that wasn't blocking too much traffic, so added this tram loop station, which I think looks really cool. Almost looks like a tiki hut or something like that, with the official yellow and red color combination for all our city tram stops. But I'm thinking when we do the tram line along N2 there, we should add one more stop by the museum here. And then filled out the rest of these blocks with an urban medical center to help out with healthcare. And I thought the modern architecture here was a nice contrast to the older architecture across the street. And it's not too tall, like nothing along this stretch is blocking the views of these houses, which is by design, I guess with the exception of the museum over there. But then got some EU waterfront low density businesses, a nice community park, and this is the Parkview Eatery from the Bridges and Ports DLC. Now for the promenade itself, obviously got some lampposts all down the length of it. And then these staircases, this is from Fragonaut's Asset Pack. Extension stairs AP, I'm not sure what the P is for, but I thought that worked out beautifully with the brick wall here, minus the blue porta potties, obviously. And then added this fountain in the center just for a nice accoutrement. But got two more of those on opposite sides of Aethelburg Square over there. And then, of course, as promised, got the city sculpture back on this side. The knight sculpture over here. We need some history behind this. And then, I don't know if I'll end with this shot, but this is the, what is this? The Bismuth Tunnel, again from the Urban Art Sculpture Pack. This is from Demudan, but I lined this up so if you look through it as a tourist, you're looking right at the lighthouse. And this is pretty cool. These beach towels are actually decals, not props, which makes it a lot easier to plop down. And again, this is from Rizra. Only thing is they highlight very easily, and it looks like they're 3D, where they go into the ground and up in the air. So it's very easy to highlight them, but I mean, visually, I think they're great. Now, before we move on, I made a giant mistake with this Ferris wheel, attaching it to the very end of the pier, because really, I want people to come on this pier and be able to go to the very end and gaze out. But now I'm blocking your view with the Ferris wheel. So I'm thinking, let's create a square on the end of this and then have the Ferris wheel on one side. All right, yeah, I definitely think this is the right move, and it preserves the view from the pier up Aethelburg Square, past the Naval Memorial, and then in between our two church towers, which have some floating tops right now. And so we come to the section of the build that I feel like everyone, including myself, will come to hate, and that is the hotel and casino along the waterfront here. Somewhat inspired by the W Barcelona Hotel, but I think my real inspiration is the Tour Montparnasse in Paris, which is that giant tower that just sticks out like a sore thumb, and is apparently universally reviled in Paris. And I feel like every city needs that, and that's what this hotel and casino will be for us. Now, as you can see, we're not dealing with a ton of land here, and if there's one thing I don't want to compromise on, it is beach access for the public and the continuation of our bike path there. I've been hearing that several European casinos are at least somewhat operated by the government, and if that's the case here, and the Crown has a hand in this casino, I feel like to remain popular with the masses, they would have demanded that the beachfront remain open. So what I'm thinking is, let's get rid of these streets back here since they're not really doing anything right now. Push this road back, and then I'm gonna move the subway from this empty spot into this plot of land here to A, serve the hotel, and B, get people closer to the new waterfront. But then we'll kind of bring out an access road for the hotel and casino, get the bike path down on this side, and I'm realizing now that I'm gonna have to redo this beach surface, which is a single unit, so I'll just like steamroll through that. But then yeah, for the building itself, this is where I want to use the Maritime Museum that I mentioned when we did that block over there, but I felt like it was a little too touristy and a little too tacky, no offense to the to that area, but I think it looks good as some kind of hotel, especially since it's nautical themed. So what I want to do is, let's look this up. I want to plop this down as the base, and it's got the wavy roof and the nautical symbols on the front, so that is just perfect. I'm gonna plop this down for now, and I'll just like reload my save after I show this off. But then you can see we have some space in the back here. I'm gonna get rid of these trees. And to take up that space, there is a custom asset that is in Chinese, so I have no idea what it's saying, but it's this one right here. And I think if we fill in this gap here, this is a police headquarters, which is ironic for a casino. We can say it's their private security, but we'll plop it in there. And to me, this looks like a ship's sail flowing along the open ocean, and it just really strikes that nautical theme, and I love it. And I think, I hate it because the hotel and casino ruining the skyline, but as a standalone asset, I think this is pretty good. Okay, I just reloaded my save and recouped like 300 grand from those buildings, but let's do some cleanup. I'm gonna get rid of these trees and these rocks, delete that subway station because we're gonna move it over here, and I think I'm gonna delete some of these subcomponents and fill up this space instead. But then we'll get rid of these roads, bring it out a little bit farther inland to make room for the building itself, and then we'll get an access road because I don't want the hotel to have its entrance along N2 since that's a very busy street. It should have its own local road. But yeah, let's do a little bit of cleanup. You can see I brought back the bike path in this section because I think it makes more sense to go down to our combined type of path, just to give ourselves enough room for that asset itself. In fact, you can see I brought out the shoreline a bit farther, again, just to make room. So let's go to our Pathways tab, and I want the divided wide pedestrian bicycle path. And this is the same exact thing we did with that connection right there. For this, let's immediately start curving to the right though. We'll go straight down the coastline and then curve towards Queen's Landing. I'm going to bring back the surface so it stops at the edge of the park, but then we'll S-curve in the bike path. Next, let's get that subway station back. So we're going to need a road on this side, and this will be one of the entrance roads into the hotel complex. So let's get a slightly decorated one. 2-lane road with trees. Let's come off from this intersection here. Yeah, something like that. Is that actually a 90? I don't believe it. Aha, it was 91. Alright, this is going to be under our transport tab. The station module, again by Roderick Matrix. All we got to do is plop down this placeholder. Select it, and I'm going to do the large station entrance, which fits this block perfectly. And just zooming in here, you can see it has entrances on both sides. You can see inside the asset. This thing is just a work of art, so highly recommend you get something like this. But let's get the platform, the subterranean one, back in order, and then reconnect our line. Alright, the subway is happy again, but this tram is not because I need to tramify this section of Edgewater Street, which is actually a good name for that street. So let's go to our tram tab this time, and all we gotta do is replace the median. And that's happy as well. Alright, for the buildings themselves, here's what I'm thinking. I'm gonna bring this road off to the right, parallel to the bike path, before coming into this intersection, and I want that to be a public road so people can get dropped off on the beach here. But then the casino complex will have an access road on the left, serving the Maritime Museum, which has the its entrance on the left there. And then the police headquarters will be spliced in on the top, and I'm thinking let's do like an access road roundabout from Edgewater there. So let's begin by getting this public road first. We'll make this as close as possible. And yeah, that's pretty close. It's looking good. All right, back to find it to get our casino floor. Access road will do another 2-laner. I'm gonna get rid of these sub-components in the back since we're about to hide those anyway. And yeah, police headquarters now to fill in that gap. So you can see technically it has road access now, but again, I don't want Edgewater Street, which should be N2. Gotta change the entire thing. I don't know how to spell whatever that road was. I'll look it up. But yeah, I don't want this to be served directly from N2, so let's get just a one-way. Ooh, do we have enough room for one with sidewalks? If not, I'll just go with the alleyway and decorate it later. I'm gonna say we do. If I push this back. Alright, and this plot of land is where I want our private pool, and this is a large sports park. It says community pool, but we all know this is private. Alright, maybe we can get like a cafe in that corner, but for parking, I want to use the invisible road path to create a custom shape here. So this is under pathways. And let's come off from here. And then another one parallel to N2. And could obviously use some detailing in there, but before we time-lapse through that, let's fill out this final spot. And I feel like right next to the pool for a hotel like this, we should definitely have a tennis court. So let's go to our Parks tab. And I have this small one from Washi 776, but as you can see, it's only a single court, and I feel like for a hotel that size, this would not cut it. So let's get the double variety. Unless, of course, you don't fit. Here, let's shift things over to the left. Alright, and with that, we can do a little bit of landscaping, some surface work. Probably need to shift over these roads now that I moved the entrance there. And then I just downloaded the Bugatti Chiron mod by KPIM Modding, and I definitely want to get a row of those out in front here just to showcase the high rollers coming into the casino. But yeah, with that, let's do a little bit of detailing. Maybe not. And that was way more detailing than I had originally planned, but I surprisingly found this kind of fun doing a hotel and casino, especially the back entrance, which we'll get to in a second. But let's start over by the beach area, which I kind of had to redo because the surfaces were going all the way into the complex here, and I wanted to make sure we were tapering off with the sand density before the bike path there. So redid that section, got some wave decals, and then a dedicated seating area for hotel guests before sprinkling in a few more beach towels here and some umbrellas. For the athletic area, I added this bus station roof as a ticket booth to the pool, since this is a private pool and you either have to be a hotel guest or a private member. And then added this storage facility in the back, which is the old lighthouse static ploppable. For the tennis court though, I left this open just to throw the public a bone, but as you can see, people are driving their Bugattis here, so good luck getting a reservation against that guy. Coming around the back here, we have this administrative building, obviously a bunch of landscaping, some planter props, some seating props over there. And then I figured this parking lot was way too small to service a hotel this size, so I added this underground lot, which is the small underground lot by Zander Moset, and figured this would go either underneath the athletic facilities there or underneath the building itself. And then did a ton of work trying to make this entrance feel more realistic. So this is the small parking building, static ploppable, and I needed something like this that was raised up, because you can see this police building has a base that goes up a little bit, and since this is not a static ploppable, I can't just lower it into the ground. Basically everything around it would be lowered. So this is kind of a happy compromise where the asphalt or the pavement goes up a little bit. I added these arrow decals to make it seem like cars are supposed to go in a one-way loop here. And then using our Aethelburg logo and the Right Everywhere mod, got some flags here. But I know in the Discord, people are cooking up some flags for the country that Aethelburg is the capital of. And once that's finished, I definitely want to have the left side be that flag. But this is a booth for valets who are going to drive your car into the lot here. And then got some nice rope fences rolling out the red carpet. And then over by the casino entrance on Casino Way, this is a one-way loop, but I added this parking decal as a place to plop down these Bugattis and black SUVs for the VIPs, but I did not know that people can actually park on these decals. And so unfortunately now we have this rinky-dink city car amongst the high rollers here. So not really what I was going for, but that's kind of cool. I guess more parking is good. And then of course another valet booth, some ropes there. And then you probably saw me trying to do a fountain here with one of Jay's or Harbormaster Jay's colored water fountains, but that thing shot up like 100 feet and that was just way too tall for this area. So got some landscaping here instead. And in my mind, this kind of looks like a ship's sail, matching the profile of the building itself. Now, of course, we need a name for our hotel and casino, and I have two ideas from the Discord so far. One is the A of Aethelburg, and I've been told that AE symbol is pronounced like A in cat, but then from Charles Simon, we have Königskroon der Meer Casino and Grand Hotel, which translates to King's Crown of the Seas, and that's pretty cool. It fits the nautical theme, and we said that the crown had a hand in this, but I definitely want to hear more ideas. So let me know in the comments, and I think we'll put it to a vote. And once we have a winner, I'm going to use the Right Everywhere mod to get a big old sign right on the roof there. Okay, y'all, final stretch here at this last bit of coastline, and I'm thinking let's keep this nice and simple, and we can always come back and spruce it up in a later episode, particularly this bay right here, which I'm not sure what I want to do with that yet, but I feel like that needs a special treatment. So let's bring a 2-lane road, just snagging down the coast, making sure we leave enough room for the bike path here. I think the road will meet up with Pinehurst around here. If I turn on contour lines, you can see it's pretty steep over there, so not a lot of room for both the road and the bike path on this part of the coastline. So the road will go up there, and then the bike path can continue all the way to our pier over there. As for the building assets, let's stick with Mediterranean heritage, since that's what we got along the entire coastline here. And that's what we started over in Diamond Coast. So I think it makes sense to stay consistent. And what in God's name happened to my port over there? I have not been keeping tabs on that. So I will need to revisit that. But let's get our bike path first going down this coast. Back to pathways. Constant slope and grounding on. Continuous mode. And let's hug this water line. You know, I'm gonna get rid of these rocks and probably the sand surface since we're gonna have to push some of this land out. And I'm not sure what type of connection this is going to make. And the answer is a bad one. Let's create a note here. And we'll curve into the road and then, I don't know, fix that connection somehow. And then I can just use a pavement surface, I think, to make it seem like these things are linked. All right, next step, 2-lane road, and we're gonna go right next to this bike path. And I think from here is where we should start sloping up into Pinehurst, since you can see we raise, or we get a lot of elevation pretty quickly. I made two connections here. This one so people can swap roads before they hit the steeper part of Ashford Street here. And these are from Harbor Master J's staircase pack. But then this one, I want to come off with a leisure pier from that connection along this outcropping, just for some nice views, making sure we don't go out too far so we don't block these people's views. But let's get a wooden leisure pier here. And I think maybe that is a good length. Yeah, that looks like it's enough. Now, on this part of the coastline, we had a beach, and I think I want to bring it back just as a placeholder until we think of a niftier thing to put there. So let's smooth out the contour lines there, get down our sand decals, and then plop down a few beach decals and some umbrellas. And then to cap off the long bike route, let's get a storage unit right behind our restaurant. And this is under our parking tab. And I think we can fit in a... can we do a bigger one? Yeah, we can do medium here. Perfect. Now I know I said I wanted Mediterranean heritage along Ashford, and I do want some of that, but not for the entire stretch. I think that would be a little too uniform. So instead, I'm going to fill in some of these gaps with one, an elementary school, since we still need capacity. And then there are two new assets from PDX Mods that I want to try. But let's start with the school. I am loath to do yet another Mediterranean one, since we have one right over here in the 4th arrondissement, and then of course the new one in the Diamond Coast across the bay. So instead, I'm going to get the Netherlands one, since it's skinny enough to squeeze in here, and it still has high capacity. So let's get this, yeah, right in there. And you know what? Let's turn this side of N2 into a quay wall. Squeeze that in there, and then immediately add the extension wing and this nice playground. I'm going to assign this to Pelennor Fields, of course, and Queen's Landing. And realizing now I've yet to make a district for the new waterfront, so we'll do that, but let's add it to the 4th and 5th arrondissements as well. The first of the custom assets I mentioned is the City Hall by Valex, and this is actually the same modder who made this Renaissance hotel over in the Old Port. And it's got the same color palette, so I think it'll work well along this waterfront. But this is under our administrative buildings. And it's got this epic front garden, so nice along our bike path too. Let's get it in between our crosswalks, or somewhat in between our crosswalks. And I don't think we have any upgrades. No, but we can surround it with trees and then fill in these gaps with Mediterranean heritage. But the second asset is the Pastel Row House by Greenblorg 61506, and I already have this up on Find It. There's no icon, but it's these nice bright row houses, and they're pretty deep, so I need some room, and I might have to make that a quay wall as well. But let's get a row of these cascading down the steeper part of Ashford here. This definitely reminds me of the Painted Ladies in San Francisco with that nice rainbow of facades down the row houses here. But really like how these assets look, especially these brick walkways in front with the gardens to the side. And are those benches? Yeah, oh, it's a bike rack. I mean, that's cool too. And then on this side, I got a Netherlands corner building here, a static ploppable, that thankfully I was able to recolor to match the color of the brick here. But that was just to make it so we didn't have a fully blank wall there. But yeah, it's looking good. So let's get some landscaping in the back and then fill in the gaps on either side of the city hall here with some Mediterranean heritage. And that, I think, I'm happy with. Very colorful. And again, we can always spruce things up at a later time, especially this bay here, looking for ideas on what we can do there. But as you can see, we need to create our district for this waterfront, really the entire waterfront. And then the last two things will be to add our tram route along N2, and we'll go from Queen's Landing, the subway stop there, all the way down to Trinity and back, and then the shuttle bus between the Oosthaven Ferry and Trinity. So let's go to our district creation tool. And I'm going to include the old Maritime Museum in Oosthaven. The waterfront itself, I'm going to name after our plaza here, which is Aethelburg Square. For now, I'm going to call this Hotel Way, but definitely want some name suggestions for the resort there. And for our last bit of coast here, since I think I've mentioned that I was supposed to be inspired by the Amalfi Coast, though again, nowhere near as vertical or as many terraces, let's call this the Athelian Coast. And we'll assign our services. For the tram line, I see we already have this one-way loop going through Pelennor Fields before making its way back down to N2. So let's piggyback off of that infrastructure, except instead of going up into the arrondissements, which is what that loop does, let's continue down N2. And we're gonna have to add some lines to this stretch here and I think upgrade our bridge. So I'm gonna pause the game. Let's get a 6-laner instead, which I have yet to unlock. Sweet, let's unlock it. We'll do a 6-lane divided road. And I'm doing divided since I want the tram lines to go right in the middle there. And that is quite the connection. And why are you mad? Here, we'll shift you over. Happier again. Did that mess up any surfaces here? No, I think we're okay, except that little bit. I guess this should probably not be a tree in the middle of the roundabout now. And if you guys see this and you're wondering why I keep that around, so this is one that I don't think I can use the lane connector tool. There you go. For whatever reason, it's not supported. So we will just live with all those tram connections, I guess. But let's continue down here and we can connect up to, yeah, those lines down there. Excellent. Now for tram stops, obviously we have the one by Trinity. Let's get one more in front of the Maritime Museum. We have our tram loop station there. Then definitely want one in front of the hotel. And we have one more stop there. All right, let's create the line. Oh, you know what? We should add one in front of our metro stop too. All right, I'll do that in a second. And we'll see if we have enough cars. Hopefully our little depot there pulls its weight. And so the last thing is the shuttle bus between Oosthaven Terminal and Trinity Station here. And we don't have a bus stop by Trinity yet. So I'm thinking let's get one on this side street. And then the bus will just loop back to Highland there before it makes its way back to Oosthaven. And I think this will make Trinity have every single mode of transportation. We got tram, subway, bus, and train. So I think that's everything. Now let's create our route. And this is a very direct shuttle. And the beauty of this is we have more stops to play with. So if you all think of any destinations, if you were stepping off this terminal, where would you want to go first? I'm guessing like City Hall and Central Station and Queen's Landing and such, but yeah, let me know in the comments. Now before we head out, I want to do one piece of community feedback, which was that this bridge does not need a sidewalk now that I've taken away the crosswalks to force people to use our pedestrian bridge. So let's go to Road Builder, select this, and I think we just chop off these sidewalks here. Ooh, okay, that was scary. And does it still have a fence? It does, good. Do a little bit of cleanup. And if you're wondering why I just didn't use a highway segment, I tried that before and these pillars pretty much came into the highway there, and for whatever reason I couldn't move it back. And in fact, I might, oh there we go. I was about to say, I might not be able to do it with this either, but I think we're okay. Ooh, that's pushing it, but yeah, we'll do what we can. I think, yeah, that's the best we can do, but making sure our lane math is right. Yeah, I don't want the left lane to be able to go straight. So let's go to our lane connector tool and disallow this. All right, I think that's looking a little better. And with that, I think I'm gonna call it a day, but looking for ideas on what to do with this bay here. The beach is nice, but I feel like we already have our main beach over by Aethelburg Square. And of course, looking for name suggestions on our new hotel and casino, something nautical themed or something related to the crown/monarchy. And one more reminder, if you're watching this before February 20th, 2026, to go check out the castle building competition on the Discord if you're interested. But should be a lot of fun, and I'm very excited to see what everyone submits. But that about wraps it up. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.